Welcome to Smart Chickens, a creative B2B SaaS podcast where we try to hatch and explore new innovative demand strategies to drive revenue. In our episodes, we have authentic, non-scripted conversations with B2B SaaS founders and leaders, where we cover deep dives into their professional journeys and uncover the strategies they use or follow in building and working within high-growth SaaS companies.
Welcome to Smart Chickens. Today we have a very special guest, Jay Maaraoui, the founder of Vyyer. It's a privacy platform, if you will, right?
Yep.
And so today we want to deep dive with you, Jason, a little bit on your journey as a founder in a space and software, which is, as you know, very competitive. But also then maybe we'll get into Vyyer and sort of the market it plays into, kind of what value is it adding, to businesses, and do a little bit more of a deep dive as we go through this podcast episode. How does that sound?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So my name's Jay. I'm the CEO of Veyyer Technologies. Veyyer does two things, right? We're a technology company that invented the first anonymous ID verification. So we can verify your ID without taking any personal details. Nothing gets sent to us. And anonymous ID verification, and combined with the technology, because our technology also has other benefits, huge ones. One is it's about 100 times faster than leading KYC providers like Jumio, Trulio. So we verify IDs in 0.1 seconds. So it's instant, seamlessly instant. And we have a huge catch rate. Normally, the industry standard is about anywhere from 20 to 40%. We're already catching 60 to 80%. What we realized really quickly on is competing with these big dogs. Yeah, it's a great market, but the speed factor really opens up new doors, retail doors, normally places that are regulated to just scanning, barcodes and just reading them. There's not really great verification. So we developed this as a product platform so we could quickly target all these different verticals. So we spent years just crafting the solution so we could be ready to go for whatever kind of business opportunity arises.
So now that, speaking of years, so let's backpedal a little bit.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about what brought you into, maybe, I don't know if your background is engineering or software. I know that you went to New York Stern School of Business, so it's obviously a very reputable business school.
Yeah.
You're in New York. Tell us a little bit about your backstory that led you to Vyyer, and then we'll go into, how you guys compete against the Trulios and PIPL. They're the other big dog in the whole search and
right.
Search and API for professionals, sort of.
Yeah, I think it's PIPL, but
PIPL,
don't quote me on that.
Yeah, but no worries. So tell us a little bit about you, Jason.
Yeah, so I've lived all over the world. I'm born in Canada, immigrated, naturalized Nova Scotia, Halifax.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
Lived in
my family in Toronto.
Oh yeah, cool. We lived in Ottawa for a few years. I haven't been to Canada in a long time, and ethnically my family's Lebanese, and so I'm always kind of split between the two cultures, second generation.
A lot of Lebanese in Southern California, as you probably are aware.
Yeah.
There's Lebanese population there.
We're everywhere.
It's a population that's growing outside of Lebanon for obvious reasons. I mean, of course, they had a war, pretty significant wars and stuff like that. Actually, one of my cousins, she's married to a Lebanese gentleman, so I get it. But what I find, and this might be true to your culture, but I think that in the Middle East, in Lebanese culture, there is an entrepreneurship spirit.
Yeah.
So how was it like growing up then? Because you're in Canada, but you got a Lebanese family. Yeah. Entrepreneurs in your family. What led you to become an entrepreneur?
So my dad is an engineer, right? He's very, let's get this done. Here's the increments. He can get a project done, right? And I always looked up to that. I'm technology. I mean, I was on a computer before I could talk, right? I'm huge into it. And I think I didn't even really know exactly what I wanted to do. I was kind of into everything, business, math, engineering. So, and as I was growing up, I keep learning these different perspectives, right? So I'm in Canada, there's kind of the culture there and then a culture at home. I go to the West, lived in the Midwest, lived in Chicago and North Carolina, saw the different cultures. And I'm still young, right? I'm learning. And then we moved to France in high school year. I'm there for 4 or 5 years in Nice, beautiful place. And I'm there with like the really wealthy international school students. We're not middle class. And high school ends, I go to New York. My family goes to Dallas. First time I'm away from home, Lebanese culture, super protective. And I go there, I know nothing, right? I admit it. Everyone asks, hey, like, what do you know? What's your background? I know nothing. I want to learn everything. And so I'm at Stern learning business and stuff. But somewhere in the back of my mind, it's not for me, man. I like the business part is great. And I love to like work with it and work with the numbers. Like that's how you like test your ideas, right? It has to work in the real world. It's got to get shaped by like reality, right? And you can't be living in a bubble. But the ideas part, that's what I really love. And so after college, my family had a restaurant and a nightclub. And so I know that industry really well. And I realized, what are kind of some of the problems like in the house, inside of the nightclubs, it's good, right? You got POS systems, you can track your liquor, your employees, but outside the door, especially if it's a larger venue, you don't really know who your customers are, right? You don't know their approximate age. You just know how much they paid and when, but you don't have like, hey, this employee is scanning this many people per hour. There's no door operations. And I saw that opportunity, but a lot of times you have to like, those ideas are cheap, but you have to like really see a problem and know how to solve it too. And learning how to solve it came when my sister turned, I think it was 19, 20. She was going to get her first debit card. And it turns out somebody had taken her social as a child and run rampant with her identity, right? So she had fraud. She took her years. She got a credit card, a few years ago. She's 20, mid-20s now. So
really impacted obviously her getting credit in a country where everyone lives and dies by credit to a certain degree, right?
Yeah, huge problem. And I was like, really? Like in a bank, you can use a social from a child and there's no like compliance? Like it was, I was really shaking because like so far I realized when I was younger, I was like, America, we got it down. Like everything's got like rules and order. And it seemed like so wild to me that you could literally have fraudsters taking the socials of young children and then making a fake with their name, like it's synthetic. So it's like part real information, maybe their name and their date of birth. And no, not their date of birth. Sorry. There's just literally an ID with any information. They put their photo on it and they go to a bank. And because it's a child, they don't have a credit report. And it turns out that the banks only really verify the social security number exists. They don't have access to your information. They don't know your name and your age. So they take this verified social, they match it to the person who first applied for your first card, whatever bank it is, TD, whatever you apply. Now they create a credit report. And now every time you go to a bank, they assume that social matches that person. So it's a huge loophole. It's a problem, right?
You would think that a mature industry like banking that has billions at their disposal to create a governance around data would have already this kind of squashed, right? Especially like we're in 2021. We're not in the early days of data breaches or like the internet where you can steal people's identity. That was the late 80s, early 90s. So that's mind-boggling what you just told me. Makes me think I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I got to be careful where we keep their social security cards now.
You should freeze it.
I will definitely tell my wife not to have it in her purse because that just blew my mind right now. What you just told me.
People are freezing their socials so that you can't get a bank account on their children now because it's so prevalent. And the thing is, the socials, they're not really that secure. They were maybe secure-ish in the 80s and 90s, but now, I mean, people reverse engineered and got like socials and names down to like a 90% accuracy. I mean,
unbelievable.
9 digits, 10 digits. No, it's 9 digits. That's not a lot of digits, man. I mean, like.
So you could put it sort of like, so people that are in I wouldn't call it dark web, but maybe the dark web, right?
Yeah.
Have algorithms, whether they're in Russia, whether they're in China, whether they're in, in Michigan, in a basement somewhere. If they really want to get to a sort of hack into your info and or steal your identity, they can. So then bring me up to speed. So now bring me forward now too. Now, you get hit with that real life experience to a loved one, your sister.
Yeah.
And you see the opportunity. Plus, it sounds like, you've had kind of a life where you've gone from, Canada to Europe, nice part of Europe, France for sure, Nice, and now, back and forth in between the Chicago and North Carolinas. And where are you presently?
I'm in New York.
In New York, right?
Still in New
So
York.
you've seen the gamut, right? So you know the US, and the 300 million plus population, the four or five devices in a household, and on the business side, the potential for privacy data breaches and just all sorts of businesses. And I guess maybe I would add to this, and you may tell me, Gianni, maybe you're heading sort of in the right path. With COVID-19, you've had remote work for a year and a half, right? So what does that mean for potential data breaches and data governance across companies, and maybe privacy issues on getting person's ID kind of ripped off, sort of? Is that something you guys do? It's more B2C, or do you
no, we're B2B. There's a huge impact to the consumer, right? Huge consumer rights win, right? You scan your ID at a store, they're not storing your information. It's huge. But also the businesses, it's toxic. The PII, or personally identifiable information, is toxic. There's a value to it. So I think Target got into some trouble for, when they scan your ID for purchasing liquor, they were saving it, and they got in trouble for it. There is a value to that information, though, because that information has critical customer data on it, like their age, date of birth, their zip code. It's valuable analytics data. But it's become so toxic that now companies are doing everything they can to get rid of it. But the problem is, it's like diversity, right? Or diverse culture. And if you're trying to change the culture of your company, it's not a simple change. And same thing with privacy. If your entire system is already set up, you have a complicated system like Target, you're going to have a major issue to kind of reformat everything into a privacy kind of pipeline. And it's tough. And with everybody working from home, and it's quick too. Like COVID happened and suddenly everyone's working from home. There wasn't time to change all of this stuff, right? There's some crazy stuff. I mean, like my sister was working as my other sister. She was working as the COVID trackers, the people call, they try to find
Sure.
She was working and then they gave her access at home to just the Salesforce database, right? And there was no security. It's just like your login, password. They don't check two-factor authentication. And she had access to everything. And it took them about 6 months into the pandemic before they realized, whoa, this is a problem. Salesforce came out with a new product. So there's that lag time between COVID, nobody can control when that happened, and then companies reacting to it. And it's a big problem.
In that vein, because you're talking about, okay, so now the pendulums, you're in New York, so you guys saw the worst of it, and now maybe you guys are in the best of it, meaning you guys have probably the lowest COVID mortality rate. I think you guys had it at 0 maybe a month ago or something like that, and you guys are always in the news because it's a popular state, New York City, et cetera, right? When we think about the pendulum swinging back, meaning now that things are getting somewhat better in control, nightclubs might be opening, retail has sort of always stayed open in a way, certain parts of it, right, across America. What are you seeing? Because as that pendulum swings back, and they might make it where as a worker in retail, you typically have to be there, like the Targets you just mentioned, right? A restaurant may or may not be at full capacity. So that impacts how many people can work, meaning how many employees need to have ID, plus the people coming to the door, right? For the ID verification you're talking about. But in businesses, that remote, many companies are like, we're remote forever. Twitter early on was the first one in big tech that announced, we don't have to have offices, right? You can work from home. And many other companies in tech space they're open to a hybrid mode of, if you want to come in once a week, twice a week, it's okay. But no one is 100% yet saying, look, we're going to push for 100% remote, probably because of the political environment that it would cause. But secondly, there might be, already sort of like a financial proven model that, hey, we don't have to spend overhead on XYZ to have people in an office physically when they were just as productive, if not more, working remote from home, especially for like knowledge-based companies that are tech companies like yours, like the ones that we serve in Digitechie, right, into the SaaS space. But what are you seeing now specifically for what Veyyer does in your products and platform?
Yep.
In terms of that potential, kind of the pendulum swinging back.
So right when COVID happened, right? Like I have, family, friends, stakeholders, right? Like personal stakeholders, they're always vested in the best, future for our company.
Mm-hmm.
And, when the pendulum swung from, status quo to COVID, everyone's like, hey, there's an opportunity to do vaccine passports. We're an early startup. We had, at that point in time, we had no pilots, no traction, nothing. And I quickly made the executive decision that it would work, but it's too political, it's too hot topic to push at that point in time, right? And they still have problems with vaccine passports. Who's in New York right now? We have one of the highest vaccination rates, yet people are wearing masks everywhere, right? That's just, people do. I asked, some business owners, hey, when are you guys going to take off your masks? They're like, when I know everyone's vaccinated, right? And so I knew we were going to miss the boat on that, right? There's no way I can compete with Oracle, Apple, trying to do their own solutions. And side note, none of them took off, right? There is no winner in the vaccine passport space. But as the pendulum swings back, you're right. There is going to be a hybrid model. Nobody really knows how, work from home, even work is going to function. And when you have uncertainty there, solutions are not going to be up to speed, right? Because it's uncertain. And it's also going to be, even when you are certain, it's going to take time to come up with the solution. Let me give you a good example. Restaurants in New York. You go to New York right now, there's no menus. You scan a QR code and then you order on your phone and you check out. The problem is at bars and restaurants, you can order liquor. And the whole concept of the menu and the QR code, so you don't have contact with the menu, right? And you don't want to hand ID. There's a problem, right? You don't want to hand your ID to somebody and they look at it. And the thing is, the solution works for solving the immediate problem of no menu, but they have no compliance solution. They don't check if you're 21. As long as you can pay your bill, they're dropping liquor off on your table. And this kind of rapid movement is a huge opportunity for us. And it's part of our strategy right now. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little side detour here. And then one of
Sure.
when COVID hit, our first, oddly enough, our first app was supposed to be for nightclubs. And it was, front door operations as people come in the door and, employee, the bouncer, security scan your ID. They can tag you where you're going. Like if you have an event here, like at 9 to 10 or 11 to 12, they can collect their information if they opt in, their email, whatever. And then they can keep track of customers, employee performance, and there's live reporting. It's really cool. The problem is COVID came and this was all our eggs were in this basket. And we realized, oh no, huge problem. We need to pivot. And pivot we did. We pivoted quickly. We realized COVID is, things are moving quickly. We needed a very clear, clean MVP, right? And so what is that? It's our technology and the most basic, bland, vanilla solution out there. Scan ID, get result. And our strategy is to get this to market, prove that the technology works, right? Because investors, big customers, they always have the same question. Does it work? Does it work, right? Like it's a binary risk. So the opportunity might be huge, but they're worried it might not work. They're not, I can evaluate that because I can say, hey, it works, but they can't. And so that's a problem. And we had this problem going back to what you said with, we had proposed a solution. Hey, when you log in to your healthcare portal, if you're a doctor, you're working from home, right? They, two-factor authentication with your phone. How about we scan your ID too? It's a third-factor authentication. You can scan it. You can actually log in with your ID, right? And I think there's a trend moving towards just having a single thing, your phone, right? Your phone, maybe your government document, but everything's going to be on the phone very soon. We talked to companies. Yeah, go ahead.
Speaking about that. So recently my wife got an iPhone, speaking of phones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Upgraded her iPhone. And the first thing it asked her was for like a facial recognition. And this looked at it like sci-fi. Literally did like biometrics on her. It scanned her face. I used to be kind of iPhone it with iPhones myself, right? But now I'm more Android. But anyhow, where I was going to get to this with what you're saying is, if we're becoming more and more mobile dependent, which is, we have been for the last, decade, if not, maybe let's say in the last 5 years, we've really become uber dependent on mobile. In your space, having a mobile app or having more and more companies that might have that remote or hybrid mode, wanting their team to authenticate through maybe, like you said, third level or even fourth level of authentication, who knows, right? All it takes is one really huge data breach, like what happened with Wells Fargo and the class action lawsuits that came from it, and also not to mention all the bad PR that they got, right? On the data breach that they had of millions and millions of customers, right? What are you seeing? Are you seeing that it's, are you getting ahead of that in your product? You were telling me a little bit, you were going into product speak and getting really into the nitty gritty of how you guys are faster than people, and also probably the biggest one, Trulio, right? But how important do you think is that next phase, which you kind of like preluding to, which is, there might be facial recognition, or there might be something where you have to scan an ID, because people may still need to get an ID, right? It might still be part of the process. Well, unpack that a little bit for us. What are you guys thinking about?
So I think if Vyyer wasn't involved at all, this is going towards a rapid degradation of your privacy in exchange for convenience. And that's the trade-off you're always doing. You might not realize it, but every time you sign up for something online, you give Apple your face, you add your card to Apple Pay, or whatever it is, you are foregoing privacy for convenience. Our entire principle as a company is to offer convenience without sacrificing privacy. And I think technology can be used to offer the same or better convenience with minimal to no privacy loss, right? And this, our privacy is a delivery model problem, right? If you think about it. So it's all about, how do users get the functions or services that they're asking for? And if the end result might be the same, but one's private, one's not. And there are, the Trulios of the world, which you send a full scan of your ID to them. They take 15 minutes. Some guy might look at it. I mean, there's different models for, Jumio might do it differently in Trulio, but you are essentially exposing your identification to get it verified. There is another model where there's a kind of identity bank, right? So like ID.me does this. So the users scan their ID, ID.me holds on to them. And then if you go to Walmart, for example, they scan your ID, they confirm with you what information you need to share with Walmart. Sounds great, right? Problem is you're centralizing the trust all in one spot. And now that's a hacker target, huge hacker target. And I mean, you write about SolarWinds, right? I mean, they can hack the US, they can hack the NSA if they want to. It's just a question of when. So our model is totally different. So what we do is, you have like a phone or a browser where you upload, you scan your ID or you scan it on the phone. The phone is brokering the transaction with us. So we verify the phone scans, the phone strips all of the PII out. Okay. We only get so we work primarily with barcodes. So we analyze the data on the barcodes. We analyze the image of the barcode, like where it is, its physical attributes. So we strip we don't need to know if you're John Doe or Jane Doe. It doesn't matter. We're verifying the contents, the compliance of all the data, like where it is, how it's, layered and ordered and sequenced and whatever. So the phone handles that, and we just verify we send the result back to the phone. And there's another opportunity too, which is, remember I told you about Target and how they were capturing all the data, and there's a huge analytics benefit, but there's a big cost. PII is toxic. We realized that the phone can also turn this PII into metadata. So Target doesn't care where, I keep saying Target, sorry. But, they don't care if you're 30 or 31, if you were born the 1st of July or they just need to know your approximate age, your demographics. They need to know they don't need to know it's John Doe who lives at 123 Main Street. They just need to know hey, this is unique customer 123, and they live in this city, state, zip, and they might have traveled this distance to get here, and then match it with with what they bought. And so the phone doesn't just broker between the phone and Vyyer. The phone also brokers back to the customer, the business, and it sends them all the data. They own it. It doesn't go through us. We don't want to be a bank for the data. We just want to be a technology layer. It's totally agnostic to the business, totally agnostic to, well, basically because we're 100% private, we can work anywhere that you need identity verified, or you're capturing some identities, or you need to onboard an identity. The technology is there. So
question.
Hopefully I answered your question.
No, that was a lot, and it's good because you're getting a little into the nitty gritty of how your value prop versus the other players that are, and they're big players, right? G2Com, right? Or G2 Crowd has, number one for satisfaction, Trulio, you got number 3 Jumio, you got people. So they're huge companies already. Not, they might be already 3 years before you or ahead of you, right? In the market, that's to say. But that's not to say that since you guys have pivoted and you're looking at it being sort of like the middleware on a technology platform and not trying to be like to your point, a data bank, that might be very, very attractive to some of these big companies that are retailers. Going to privacy, back to, personal privacy information. It's news, obviously. Apple just launched their opt-out versus you're opting in for privacy. And Facebook, admittedly, is having a mini panic attack because of the value of that PPI that helps for them with their, obviously on their business side, which is selling ads to advertisers through marketplace, through Facebook and what have you, and even maybe their other companies that they have as well, like Instagram. So in the big picture of things, right, Jason, what are you seeing that a company that's like a Target, big retail, and or even more niche, clubs, as the COVID starts, coming under control to some kind of new normal and things start opening up again as they are, what's the biggest impact that Vyyer can have for those businesses? And I know, of course, someone listening might say, well, it's going to be very biased, but you've actually given us and painted a nice picture of what the other competitors in the marketplace do, or the big boys and the 8,000-pound gorillas do. So what's the value prop where you see, hey, this is where the benefit comes for a retailer and or for a nightclub?
So it goes to the psychology of the customer. Privacy is usually a fear-driven consumption, right? You're scared of a lawsuit, you're scared of a breach, you're scared of consumers boycotting your products. And recently it's become so frequent. So it's not some, hey, I'm going to save you from some, 1 in 1,000 legal, bill you're going to have to foot if you pay me just this, right? I'm not selling insurance anymore. Now it's become a profit center rather than a cost center, having privacy built in. And I think the biggest opportunity for us is to immediately solve their ID verification needs, right? Because in retail, there is no solution. The only solution is scan the ID. You may or may not keep the info, but check the issue date and expiry. There is, the technology in retail is you're catching maybe the bottom of the barrel fake IDs. That's problematic. Now, where we kind of put the icing on the cake will be on the data side. So Walmart can know exactly what the demographic of people are that are buying X, right? Because it's in the same system, what they're buying and scanning the ID. They can match those two pieces of data together. And I think, the sales team is going to be it's a wet dream, right?
So you're saying data enrichment, basically. So your platform gets the PPI data that could then be used for data enrichment for marketing, sales teams in B2B. Now retail is B2C, although, because I'm thinking the last time I actually had a show idea at like any place like a Target would be like if I'm buying beer or liquor. And if you're not going through self-service where you're just trying to check out yourself and you're with a cashier, they typically, want, or even if you are going through the self-checkout, actually, they want to check your ID, right? That's like the only time I think I've had to give ID. Obviously at nightclubs, you gotta give ID, right? You look younger.
Banks as well.
Or if you're an employee, to your point, and you work at a bank,
yeah,
they entrust you with very critical data of their that bank's customers. So they want to make sure the person that's working or representing them is not a liability. So I get that. Tech companies, I'm thinking of like tech companies, it's odd that to think, but unless they're a really big tech company or on like mid growth or something like that, they may really not have a very sophisticated system of authenticating their employees, especially now that things are remote. So that's an interesting opportunity, I imagine, for you and everyone in your marketplace, right? It's what can you bring to those companies that are still going to have that hybrid modality of work, and that everyone's logging into their CRM, to maybe their own software. If they sell software, maybe they're drinking their own Kool-Aid and using their own software. And so they still need to verify that it's not a competitor coming in and sneaking in through the back door to kind of, do some damage or what have you. So you guys are doing that, right? The B2B as well for software companies?
So we can give the data coming in from the customers our sales are to the business. They might interface with the customer, but also the, customers themselves, they have employees, they need to log in, right? And partnering with like, say, a LogMeIn or, some sort of Auth0 and some company that offers logins as a service, partnering with them as a second factor authentication. That's one of the channels where our team discusses, right? Like that's one of the big market opportunities we see, because going to each company and, trying to pitch, that's going to take time and the sales cycles are long. There's opportunity there. There's also one that maybe we haven't touched on as well, which is the supply chain management. So right now, all products are, they have UPCs on them. Most products, almost all products you find in a retail store have them. And you see IoT devices coming in now where, they can track really well and accurately what's going into the warehouse, what's leaving the warehouse. The problem is they're bulky and they're expensive, and different warehouses across, there's multiple, right? There's the retailer, there's the manufacturer, and a bunch of suppliers in between, sometimes cross ocean, travel, and different stakeholders in the value chain will have different setups. And that's problematic. You might have like a black hole in the knowledge as it goes down. Once a distributor might not know when a supplier sold product X. So what we are proposing to that industry is it's the reverse of ID verification. We create encrypted barcodes that have a secure key hidden in them. It's a UPC. When you scan it, it's the code is the UPC code, but there's a hidden item level thing in there. So when they scan it, that data can get shared instantaneously on an item level. And you can track that information and get shared up and down the supply chain. So different people can just whip out their phone, scan the product. You can now track. So like, let's say Juul, right? They're a vape producer. They could know, hey, I came out with mango flavored or some new flavor. They can know instantaneously when they're selling in the retail store and adjust production accordingly, right? So that kind of real-time data and information is really helpful. And we all felt this, right? Toilet paper was out of stock, right? Because they couldn't adjust production in time. It's very different it's similar to just-in-time inventory management, but that's at a single stakeholder, like one key link of the chain. Supply chain management is about every link in the chain, getting them all synchronized. So yeah, that's a big B2B.
That definitely is B2B at its core.
Yeah.
So talk me through a little bit, so how many years is the company? Because obviously you've been thinking about this company for some time now, and you've got 8 people, it looks like, at least it says that on LinkedIn. What's your team look?
So we have 15, I believe, in our team. So we have system engineers. So we have a system engineer, back end, front end, junior devs. We have myself, I'm the product manager on top of being CEO. We have a DevOps. We have a sales team of 3, a designer, and a CRO, chief revenue officer. Well, we fluctuate a bit, but around 10 to 15 is where we're at right now.
And are you guys, obviously it's private, so bootstrapped or looking for VC, or are you guys early on right now and are looking at more the development part of your
It's tough because we are bootstrapped. I put in, all my savings, right? Risk it for the biscuit. I put in well over $250,000, and we have another angel investor at 100K. The problem with with venture capital so early is this is my first startup. So if you don't have a track record of, because there's so many components to startup: development, technology, being able to sell. You can have the best product, you can't sell it, you got nothing. So going to VCs for pre-seed money, it's very tough. Honestly, it's not very productive. So our key right now is we're on the precipice. So we have a pilot in place with Cappies. They're a 11 to 12 store location, franchise in Boston, liquor stores. So they have it's gonna be anywhere from 50, 60 to 100 licenses. We're actually rolling them out less than a week from now.
Congratulations, by the way. So that's kind of one of your first early adopters, and a pretty big one at that, with it being a well-known kind of franchise Boston area. So congrats. So
VC money, it's like if I hit a couple good customers, I might not need VC money, right? It's SaaS, it's profitable.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, because I think it's always interesting, right? So you're a SaaS founder, right? Mm-hmm. You're playing the multiple hats, which I've heard other SaaS founders talk about that on the early days of the startup. Obviously, everyone's rolling up their sleeve. If the founder happens to be technically inclined because they have program or development background, then they're getting dirty and actually writing code and doing the product dev and helping the team. Or vice versa, if maybe not technical, but the founder is very much into marketing and sales, they don't recruit in a CMO per se. They become that sort of CMO and co-founder, right? So interesting you mentioned that, Jason. And what I've noticed when I've spoken to these founders that are bootstrapped is that they very much like what you said, they prefer to spend their time and energy and brain share on keeping it profitable if it's heading in that direction, and getting more, looking at acquiring new clients and figuring out how they're going to market to acquire new clients, versus spinning their wheels maybe to get early seed money from VCs on valuations that they may not even understand yet because they haven't really reached their own milestones. So it sounds like you're at that stage. Having said that, right, or hindsight is always 2020. Where you are with growth, where you're looking to come into the market, what would be your first major sort of milestone of either ARR or MRR to hit, and also would that mean now it's a time to invest in more dev or more sales or more marketing? From a founder's perspective, I think this would be good because other founders will probably hear and listen to you as well and have their own journeys.
Absolutely.
That they've gone. But what is your sort of take on that? What you hit the certain milestone, what are you going to invest in?
So, just talking hindsight for a second, the biggest problem, the biggest hindrance we had was just having a deluge of money early on before COVID. When COVID came and budget got tight, that's when we really had to be extremely critical, lay out all of our thinking, analyze it to the nth degree before we made any decisions. We had money, hey, build the best product, make sure it's very clean, but you're always making assumptions about your customer. And the best way to minimize that is to keep your product as slim as possible and be able to quickly deliver it to market. You should always be launching. And it was a hard lesson. Hopefully we kind of learned the lesson without incurring too much of the cost. We do have something for it, but in hindsight, focus on just your core technology, who's going to buy it, talk to them. You have to talk to your customers. If you're not talking to your customers while you're in development, you're making a huge mistake. You should already know when you're talking to a potential ask for advice. It's the best way to get, customer feedback and insights. And then once you do get the traction, the biggest next step is replicating, right? And until recently, I was like, hey, I got this Cappies deal. Let me go and leverage that into maybe an insurance market, we've had some talks with big players there. And big thing for them is for claims. You scan the ID, it fills out the form, verifies the ID in one shot. Super interested by it. But instead of focusing on that, focus on replicating, right? Why did this customer succeed and others didn't? And you need to document that and create a process to replicate it, because it's not just for you. You're also going to create a sales team that needs to do it themselves. You can't be doing everything forever. And if you don't start thinking about how to make these processes, you're going to fail, or you're going to be a mid-sized, or like, you're going to make a good amount of money, but you're not going to hit the stars, right? It's not a moonshot anymore.
Right. That brings me to thinking about other founders have mentioned scaling, right? So you reach a certain threshold, to your point about replicating best practices of why you won such a deal, maybe then deep diving into what was the sales cycle behind it, who were the decision makers, who was your ICP, your ideal customer profile, what was the marketing and sales pitch to them, all that and that brings me to thinking about, you're obviously a SaaS platform founder. So what does your tech stack look like to help you and your team with that? So what are you guys using for sales? What are you using for marketing to help document that journey, that buyer's journey, and say, hey, here's why it worked. These are the playbooks we use, and here's how we should now scale and replicate this across this vertical and maybe others by tweaking it a bit, perhaps, because not every industry is the same, obviously, but at least you're replicating something that did work as a process.
So listen, my philosophy, and this is going back to the other lesson, is not to build a product until you know it works, whether it's internally or for a customer. So right now it's rough. We just literally, every meeting I take notes, I codify them, and we just try to analyze and drill down to the ICP. And so when in the liquor market, it wasn't just, hey, first customer we called, it was a success. We first started with small customers, right? Work our way up. We quickly realized they're like, hey, we're not going to add anything to our very efficient small business unless you're replacing the whole POS. If you can do that, call us back. Obviously, that's not a direction we want to go into. So we started reaching out to larger stores. In New York City, depends on the regulations. We didn't know this. I mean, we kind of knew, but we didn't like know it. And in New York City, yeah, you can get a fine or a black mark on your liquor license, but you can kind of pay a fee. It doesn't happen too often. What they care about is fraud prevention. People calling in, doing curbside, and then say, hey, I didn't use my card. Somebody else used it. And they need to scan IDs to match it to the receipt. Getting closer, but it's not our MVP, right? I can do it, but we kept trying to see if there's maybe another place where just the security factor, just that comfort blanket of knowing that you're selling to someone of age is worth it. So we looked at states, hey, regulation. In Massachusetts, really tough, really, really tough. You get a couple black marks, doesn't matter how big you are, you're gonna have problems. Some other states like that. So it's about refining, like, what is the demographics of your customer, what's the geographic or regulatory constraints of said customer, and then building a recipe, right? But before I start sharing the recipe, I got to try it out myself. So now it's going to be about building, sort of ordered playbook to, start maybe in Massachusetts. Are there any similar sized companies that, trying to go? COVID's an opportunity, right? COVID kind of forced them to, have to grow outside of the store. So suddenly these small independent operators are becoming, a little bit of an Uber Eats kind of thing. And so we just need to analyze their businesses and then come down to some somewhat qualified potential prospects, and then, learn from there. Once you get a pipeline, you've repeated it, I'd say 3 times. I think that's the time to start building an enablement systems, CRMs, and start scaling, right?
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, you're definitely doing product-led, sort of like a product-led founder marketing, go-to-market, product-led, right? So to your point, you're making sure that you have the product that's fitting the market, and that market, you guys are discovering it sort of through, I wouldn't say trial and error, because you guys obviously know what verticals you're going after, retail, nightlife, obviously supply chain, which can imply a whole group in the B2B space, right? Or subgroups. So that's interesting. Yeah, I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. So I typically have, Jay, this, no pressure here, but it's sort of like a rapid fire section. Questions that gets a little bit into your founder's personality, as well as just kind of what you're doing probably. So let me do the first one. So, if you could jump back to the future, right? I'm in my 40s, so Back to the Future was the the movie franchise that I kind of grew up with, right? But
Yeah.
you get into the DeLorean with Marty and Doc to speak to a younger, and I know you're pretty young, but to a younger Jason.
Yeah.
What would you say about what, any advice you would give him?
Yeah, it's just explore your bubble, fail fast and quickly, right? Like just learn, make mistakes, and just stay open minded. You have to be coachable, right? So, I mean, this is like naturally I'm introverted, but I've kind of learned over time to, break out of that. It's just a knowledge gap, right? And I feel like if you're open to it and you know it's critical to interact with people, you can slowly kind of start understanding maybe what you're not exposed to. Expose yourself to it. Without exposing yourself to it, you'll never learn. And it took me, I wish I had learned it sooner. I'm still young, but I think it was the best thing ever, is just getting exposure to things you might like, you might love, you might want to do for the rest of your life, people you might want to spend the rest of your life with, right?
Yeah, no, that's some good advice. Yeah, kind of get out of your comfort zone and just be willing to learn and to fail fast and pivot, which I know that your company sort of did that as soon as COVID hit, which is a testament to you actually, adapting quickly in your company. So now I believe firmly that readers are leaders and vice versa, I guess. And so what are some either business books, or they don't have to be business books, that have inspired you, or your team kind of to head into this business world that you're in right now?
I like listening to podcasts. I also like Startup Therapy is good. I liked reading Blue Ocean. I'm a big Reddit guy. I like reading like different industries, like they have their own kind of thing, and people make posts like, what's a day like in a Microsoft product engineer, right? You learn from, maybe I won't ever get to experience that, but I learn a lot from it. Another thing is gamesmanship. And it's an aspect of negotiation that's really critical to early stage startups. It's not like I'm learning pieces and putting it together on my own, but when you're a kid and you ask your mom, hey, can I go out tonight and do this? She's like, ask your dad. If he says, ask your dad. And you go to your dad and you're like, hey, dad, mom said I can go out if you say I can go out. And he says, yes. And you go out and come back, but you get in trouble. But that's gamesmanship, right? You're taking something that you're taking a possible yes here and leveraging it into an opportunity on the other side. And super critical for startups, because that's how you get your first customers, right? Inbound, you don't have any credibility or street cred. It's tough. So what you do is you take like, hey, Cappies, hey, I got to deal with Cappies. We have a pilot, we have an SLA. It's going good. You go and leverage it to their competitors. You go and some potential, I don't know, it's happened to us, a corporate venture capital company, big company, said, hey, if you get a customer in X or Y, we would say we're partnered with you. All I needed, I go to X and Y and tell them, hey, we got a big person backing us. That's how you make deals happen. And
I like that you're saying that's interesting, because gamemanship, we are sort of in this game of life, game of business. So you've got to learn how to leverage, right, and negotiate a bit and leverage what you have and maybe what you don't have, but everything's kind of in the optics, right? So you've got the right optics, then you can maybe get a foot in the door. So that's awesome. You actually just mentioned something that made me think before I get to the next rapid fire question. So inbound versus outbound versus maybe or omni-channel. You're a SaaS company going into verticals where there is money at the table for your type of solution because that the market is demanding it. What are you like, either in a perfect world, or where are you seeing the company heading? A bit of outbound, so your sales team doing the outbound, cold email reach. Obviously, you guys have a definite market you guys are going after, but what is that? Are you doing 80-20, 50-50, 60-40, or it's too early? You guys are just sort of testing the waters in terms of creating content for bringing it in sort of through inbound or outbound reach cadences, which is, important as well, or a bit of both, like the omni-channel approach?
So I have a lot of ideas on this, but I'll be quick. Right now, I think content is great for brand identity and just building a presence. Okay, it's an investment. I look at inbound as a product of demand, like outbound. So at the beginning, right now, it's all outbound. I have to do outreach, talk to customers, learn the sales cycle, and then you craft your inbound based on the knowledge you've learned from your outbound. And then my thought process right now is depending on the size of the market, like the size of the customer, I'm looking to do an account-based marketing strategy. So we define our ICPs. I know you're a man of account-based marketing when you said ICPs. So we define our pool of target industries, cross-functional teams. We all agree on, what to pick at first. We make a list of target clients. We run pre-targeting campaigns, and then we do outreach to a small targeted group of potential clients. And then we learn about their buying committee, and then we start targeting each one through a marketing, and sales are going to work hand in hand. So then the marketing guys can't be like, sales guys aren't clearing the sale. They're not getting it through the pipeline. Sales guys can't be like, marketing guys are doing a bad job. They have to work together. And I think this strategy is going to be like the most scalable strategy for us. As long as we start thinking this way on day one. It's tough to do later, like if you're already established.
Yeah, well, first I got to say that it's encouraging to hear a founder CEO with a technical background such as yourself thinking about ABM. I think ABM is the new B2B, right? Or ABM is B2B. And if you don't have that already as part of your process or mentality from the top to give to your sales lieutenant, your marketing lieutenant, your marketing partners, whomever it is you're going to use, then you're sort of already coming in as a disadvantage. So that's awesome that you're thinking ABM. So that's good. Now, you got a lot on your plate, Jason. I mean, it's incredible that, just a short while ago, you were telling me, listen, I already had another business. We kind of pivoted during COVID and turned it into Vyyer and are moving forward with it. So is there an app or a hobby or sport, something that lets you recharge and reboot during your work week to try to keep productive? And what is that?
Lots of chess. I'm a big chess player. Just enjoy the game. And I'm an avid gamer. That's actually how we got our first 100K investment. It was my gaming buddy. I pitched him the idea. All right, I'm always on the sale. And we got a 100K investment just playing PlayStation, man. So now my dad calls me. He's like, are you wasting time on that thing again? I'm like, that's how we get investor money, baby.
So, that's you know what? I'm going to definitely highlight that on the show notes. Interesting. Not a founder, but he's a top voices in sales, Morgan J. Ingram. And when I asked him, like, what do you do kind of to unwind? And he's a gamer as well, right? He's really a cool cat out of Atlanta and the company that he works with. But it's surprising that, we're talking about a generational workforce that's changing, right? So when you want to connect with people that are in like maybe millennials or Gen Zs, you could do it probably more likely to get a better response if you're a gamer or have some kind of gaming analogy versus if you're a Gen Xer or a baby boomer. I fall in Gen Xers, right? Yeah. We have to have some other analogies, maybe more of a sports analogy. I don't know what. So that's interesting. And that's pretty cool that your gaming buddy trusts and believes so much into you in your business that he's willing to come in with that investment. That's awesome. So was there anything that I, didn't ask or that you wanted to discuss that we didn't talk about?
Let me see. What do you think? What do you think of like all of this? Like, where do you see like kind of?
Well, I mean, I'm very fascinated with this because I think, like in the world that we have been living for the last 10 years, right? And with data privacy like GDPR that came out and all B2B companies in Europe had to quickly adjust to that. With COVID that came in and became an accelerator to anything and everything being more digitized. And with that, the opportunity for, data governance breaches and things like that. I think you guys are in a perfect, it's almost like a perfect storm for a business like yours, right? I'm very curious to see how you're going to grow this thing and pivot because you've already made some certain micro pivots to your overall MVP. So, I'd be, open to having maybe a future podcast, maybe 3 months from now or 6 months from now and saying, hey, now, Jason, let's talk about, how you brought this to market to these verticals and industries. I think it's a good play on software. I like the fact, Jason, that you're talking about also trying to, help with data enrichment, but in a way where you're looking, where your company seems like the bad guy, quote unquote, that is taking all this, kind of customer data and information, which is, most customers are now starting to really, at least to a certain extent, push back, right? So they're not all just clicking on, most probably are still clicking on accept when they download an app. But when you have someone like a Apple coming out and saying to the market and to the world, hey, listen, we get it. Certain generations may not be comfortable with all this sharing of their private, information. we're going to let you opt out. That's a huge kind of, it's a huge message and maybe a change of the narrative. And I think that gets pushed because the younger generations, are pushing back. Maybe even some of mine, Gen Xers, right, are maybe part of that conversation as well. So that's kudos to you and your team. I'm interested to see what happens, for sure.
I think from a purely objective business perspective, you take almost anything that exists today and add privacy to it, you have a product that's saleable. Like it's a business, right? Privacy is for consumers. I mean, I started this as from a moral business standpoint, but in reality, you make a anonymous Twitter, right? I mean, Snapchat, part of their, thing is an anonymity. Signal, right? WhatsApp updated their privacy guidelines, and Signal. I just saw my contacts list. Everyone pinging. Why is everyone joining Signal, right? It's the future. And what Apple really did there was they made it easy to opt out, right? A lot of times they hide it behind a bunch of, I got to read all this and then just, click it, right? I think when users are presented with a fair choice that they can quickly make, they will, nobody wants to give their data for free, right?
Right.
Valuable. So
I agree 100% with that. And I think that that's sort of the future of where privacy kind of lies, right? Consumer. And because of that, I think, your company and probably people in your space are going to be able to add value to that and maybe monetize it. Also, that you're in SaaS helps because, if you do the right, kind of SaaS metrics, all of a sudden it's like having an ATM machine. I didn't say this, Nathan Latka said this, and I love that he said it. It's like, where else could you put in $1 in an ATM machine and it spits out 60, right? Okay. Which is what SaaS could potentially, the metrics of it. And as you scale, what could happen with a business like that, right?
And I'm always looking for stuff like that, like just making it viral or adding in network effects. This is further down, right? I always get told to talk now, but we could literally build a consumer app where you scan your ID and you could see everywhere it's been scanned and just swipe out, just be like, hey, I want to opt out, right? And so banks are having a problem with, right? And banks right now are having, like, if they get a CCPA request for a list of every single piece of data they have on a consumer from the 70s, it's like paper. It's a nightmare, and stuff is in cold storage. You got to open up. It's right. They literally pay people.
The shredding companies too, the huge industry. Yeah. Right. Come in, just take all this paperwork and shred it. Right. So, you know what? I honestly think that there's some legs to what you just said about that whole making it so transparent. That's a word I think that most B2B companies are more and more embracing, especially after COVID-19. I think that it kind of reset a little bit on the geopolitical side of things too. This whole idea of empathy and transparency. And I think that on the consumer side, consumers want to see that transparency and feel the empathy of, hey, listen, I want to know that my data is private, that it's not getting breached, and that I'm not going to have, the situation like unfortunately happened to your sister, right? Of having her ID stolen as an infant or a baby, right? So kudos to what you and your team are doing. I'll be excited to get back to you on a follow-up episode if you're open to it, Jason.
For sure.
And how can folks connect with you and learn more about Vyyer and your platform and how it offers privacy solutions to this industries? And as well, maybe to even just pick your brain and discuss a little bit about kind of your SaaS founder journey and your marketing, sales strategy, and leadership.
Yeah, you can learn more at Veyyer.com. That's VYYER.com. We also have a live demo there. You can actually sign up, scan your ID anonymously, and then just see what gets sent to us, what gets sent to the customer, the verification result. You can reach me directly, Jason, JASON at Veyyer, BYYER.com. Ping me there and we'll chat. I love talking.
All right, great.
That's how you learn new things.
Again, Jason, thanks so much for the time on being on this episode of Smart Chickens, a B2B SaaS demand gen meets innovation podcast. And, we'll definitely be putting some of the books and links to your website on the show notes.
Yeah.
So, thanks for the time today.
For sure.
Make sure to follow and subscribe to Smart Chickens podcast at digitechie.com/smart-chickens and all podcast channels. If you get value from our podcast content, make sure to leave a review, share, and connect with our host, Gianni Quintana, on LinkedIn.